All right, everybody, welcome to another week of. We're trying to come up with a new catchy name for our podcast instead of just calling it Game Wisdom Live. Right now we have the Weekly Wisdom, but we could use some help with naming, as you can see in our lovely new layout provided by Cyberpunk Shark over there.
Yeah, I had to get you hooked up with a little bit something better than what you were using, which was nothing but
Yeah.
Windows set up everywhere.
Mm-hmm. But
Hopefully, everybody will like it.
but at least nobody will be confused by who we are with our names down there below, as well as where we go. And hopefully, people like our nice little gold frame for the chat window, too. And Shark is going to be working on some layouts for the other streams and the live cast as well, which shouldn't be that much of a stretch from this one.
And I mean, they'll definitely have their own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Main thing would be the layouts, which is what we spent the first like 3 days on or
Yeah.
something.
But yeah,
And
I think as with everything, it looks a hell of a lot better than it did before.
yep, I think so.
But we kind of started late because of all that finagling, so we're going to get right into things for our show. So, as always, some quick updates about what's going on with Game Wisdom. I finished my last presentation, at least for this season. I still have plenty more calls to make. I'm not done there. Didn't have quite a great show, though, to be honest. I was at a fan nation, like kind of like their Comic Con, like a fan kind of group presentation thing, and I think I kind of got like swept under the rug because of that. Because,
Mm-mm.
as we all know, I am not exactly the best fandom kind of guy. I will criticize even the games that I love.
I thought you were the number one YouTube streamer.
Mm-hmm. I only got like one person for the YouTube show, which is like the strangest thing. And the guy there is like, yeah, I'm not sure I want to make on YouTube yet. Okay, so then why are you here?
Mm.
I don't know. Like maybe they should have just said that PewDiePie is going to be here, and then say, "Oh, we had a last minute cancellation. It's going to be this guy."
You should absolutely do that. It
Mm-hmm.
would cause no confusion. Nobody would be angry about that. Everybody would be absolutely happy about it, including that blacksmith over there named Thorn.
Mm-hmm. And hopefully the text looks all right. Let me know, like for those of you watching this, if you're able to see that text. We may have to zoom that window in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and even with me full screen, it's pretty hard to read.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Of course. Maybe around here. Always the fun of zooming in and out.
That's probably going to mean you're going to need to readjust that box too.
Yeah. Over here. Stretch, I say. Maybe like that could be a little bit better. Alright. We'll see what people say as we get things. And again, for anyone watching this live or recorded, you have any comments on the layout or anything we have set up, let us know in the comments and such. Let's see, maybe if I.
Icons could go up a little bit. I don't know what you mean by that.
That.
Do you know, Josh?
Could he mean the names or the logos?
Oh no,
Yeah, we'll have to see.
I am too loud apparently.
The free space between your pick and face cam.
Between the pick and base cam. You talking about moving the names up higher?
Maybe shrinking them in a little bit. Top
Maybe,
four.
but
Mm-hmm.
I left them long so that when we go to put other people's names on there, there's more room for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, we may have to. It's going to be a little bit weird, I think, in terms of the text. This is one of the issues I ran with in when I do it with just the regular layout. That sometimes I have to stretch that window out. Why I kind of always pull that chat window a little bit further. I can lower the gain on him very slightly. Oop, that's a little too much.
I think
Plus, my
I'm going to
voice
try to
is.
get you something more universal. So
Yeah,
you ain't got to worry about all these adjustments kind of thing.
yeah.
A almost set it and forget it kind of setup.
hmm Or maybe the best thing would be to get something like a custom chat layout that we can put over the chat or the YouTube chat that then just makes it all exactly how we want it.
Here's a question: can you dark theme your chat, your YouTube chat? Because I think that would go a long way towards visibility.
I don't think I can. I know you can do it with YouTube itself. Turn it, put it in dark mode.
Well, if you do it with YouTube itself, it should hit the chat
Yeah.
too.
I never done that before.
Oh, I live on dark mode.
Boy. Yeah. Yeah. Fortunately, we don't have the time to be doing this. Maybe we'll set up some other time to do a YouTube check. But hey, Lord, welcome to our new layout. Be sure any complaints, aim it at Shark, which I'm still have to get the camera right. Everyone says they hate it already, right?
Yeah, they absolutely hate it. It's the worst. It's worse than just having random windows placed everywhere.
hmm But yeah, we'll mess with the chat layout for another time. So, still have plenty more calls to make. Of course, this week coming up is going to be Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and all the other great stuff. So I'm sure everybody's going to be very much eager to hear me talk about game design. I'm sure Shark is noting every feedback he gets too. But had the presentation yesterday didn't go as well as I would have liked, unfortunately. I got beaten out by the cosplaying contest as well as an escape room. I can't escape the escape room, Shark.
Uh-uh. You got the inescapable escape room.
Yeah. I guess the only thing to do would be figure out some way to trap the people in the room, then they have to escape or listen to my presentation. Oh God, he's talking about game design. Get us out of here. We need to crack this cryptogram.
uh,
Oh, and the best
I
part.
wonder how the libraries would think about putting your escape room in their libraries.
But the worst part was they told me that I would be from 12 to 1 and then 2 to 3 because I wanted that hour-long break. And the one just said, oh no, you're starting at 11 to 12 and then 12:30 to 1:30. And she didn't tell me until after I got there at 11:15.
Mm.
Don't you love it when they give you the wrong times?
Oh yeah.
But we got a lot to talk about, and we need to get things rolling because we'll be here till like 8 or 9 o'clock at this rate. So, very briefly, in terms of news, we had Stadia officially come out and not do too much with it. I guess were you excited at all about Shark?
I was most looking forward to what kind of stuff was going to roll downhill. Because I seen this coming after the last few posts they put, ignoring pretty much all feedback. It's like, yeah, as a developer, I know what happens when you ignore feedback.
Mm-hmm. It always goes well, right?
Yeah.
Ignore your audience, and your game will turn out perfectly.
That too, Oscar. I'm very excited for the gender-neutral controllers.
Oh, the other big news. Speaking about about like new stuff and streaming, we're finally getting a new Half-Life game. It's going to be VR. Stream seems to be acting up a little bit. Hopefully, it won't screw anything up. Oh yeah, we actually had snow here earlier today.
Uh-uh. You're going to
But
get snowed in and unable to go out and do your cherry tomato cosplay.
mm-hmm. I could have won that cosplay contest earlier.
You should have. Matter of fact, that's how you should do it next time. You should go win the costume contest, and by winning that, everybody's going to follow you into the game development chat.
There we go. Now I just lost my whole train of thought there. Oh yeah, so we finally got a new Half-Life game, but it's going to be VR only. So the apocalypse is not happening just yet, people.
Yeah, actually had a little bet on that. Not on whether it's VR or something, but whether they were going to give us a trailer or a teaser. And it was a teaser, and I got that one.
Hope you put money on that one too.
I put a humiliating thing for my friend on that one.
That could be worth more than money in some cases.
Yeah, I think it is.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we almost forgot. We were the trendsetters because last week we talked all about the remote play, and Steam was never mentioning it, and why nobody was talking about it. And then literally the day after, Valve unveiled the multiplayer bundle sale.
And every YouTuber started covering it.
Yep, and websites.
Mm-hmm. We were the trend starters.
We did.
We didn't get that many views, did we?
Yeah. Oh boy, we were good. If we would have done maybe 1 week earlier, maybe we would have gotten like everybody.
Well, we gotta start having the whatever we name this cast 2 times a week then.
Oh, good. Yeah, that won't kill any of our schedules, right?
No.
Well, that'll be happy for Mojo, and again, they like to watch us talk for like 8 to 10 hours. They don't care. We take like a 3-hour sleep break and just have us streaming us like falling asleep at our keyboards, and they'll still watch. That'll even be more popular than us actually talking about design.
It might be.
But let's get to our major topics, because we do have to get through things relatively like on a schedule today, because we start out extra late. So, what topic do you want to talk about first, Shark? Knowing when to bend or adding value?
I think we start with knowing when to bend.
Okay. So, this is a topic that... okay, of course, 12 hours. Again, I need that like the taxi cab fee in the bottom there. Like, as you donate, it adds more time to the cast. And then Chow will show up, donate like $1,000, and we'll be here for like 3 weeks.
It's a 3-week stream.
There we go. But this was a topic that Shark brought up, and it's one that, again, is something that a lot of developers run into, especially when you get into early access and playtesting. And that, again, is knowing when to adhere to your vision of your game and knowing when to bend. Because, the Get Good podcast. But, it's one of those topics that it sounds easier than it really is. Because, at the end of the day, you obviously want to listen to your fan base, because again, they're your fans. They know what they like. They know what they want to see. But in the same breath, what they want to see may be in complete contrast to what your vision of the game is. And even vice versa sometimes. I've spoken to developers who have gotten like crazy ideas from their fans that ends up making their game a lot better. Just as they got ideas that, if they would implement them, would completely destroy their game. And of course, the question is, how do you know when to kind of like sift through all this? So, and Shark, if you wouldn't mind keeping this as a kind of a short example, why don't you talk a little bit about what you went through with Project Triad?
Oh, well, what I went through with Project Triad, this was a long experience that took over 3 months. El Gordo was involved. Kier, aka Kinzan, was involved. several other people were involved,
Got
and
me involved too.
hmm just a little bit.
Hmm.
And I was making icons and such to for each of the stats to represent whether it's higher, lower, or equal to.
Hmm.
Um, and I made several shapes. We voted between the shapes, and then I made several colors, made several combination of colors, made then I did shades of colors and all kinds of stuff. They're like vote after vote after vote over vote for over 3 months.
Hmm.
And a lot of people were like, "Oh God, I'm tired of you, asking me to vote on this and whatnot." And some of them were saying, "Well, I'm just going to pick random stuff." I was like, "Please don't do that." And I was like, trust me, I know that you guys, this is like a bit much for you guys, but like it's even worse on me because I don't just gotta like vote on them. I gotta make them, lay them
Hmm.
out, submit them to everybody, get everybody's opinion, and listen to everybody's complaints. And it was lots of work. And when some people had forgotten about it or just ignored it or whatever, I had to hit touch base with them and try to get something out of them or find out where to
Hmm.
skip or whatnot. And I did all this work over 3 months, and lots of people helped in the voting process. And then I got to the point where, okay, we're not final, but we're close enough. Let me show you what we got, and you'll put it on the card. And everybody absolutely hated it. And I was like, oh. And then in came tons of suggestions, and
Hmm.
99, 98% of them would not work and whatnot.
Hmm.
And we got a few that would work and it might work. And then I tried those few, and then we found the new setup, which is bad in some ways because it doesn't appeal. It's not good for color people who are colorblind, and we want to make the game accessible.
Hmm.
So, because that was the whole point behind the icons is, not just identify it by color, but identify it by a shape. But
Hmm.
now all our shapes are going to be uniform. So, yeah, it's just strictly color now. So now we got to go in and put like an extra option in the menu or something to allow them to change the colors.
Hmm.
And hopefully they're not colorblind to where none of the colors will work for them.
Yep.
That's then we failed being accessible at that point.
Hmm. But uh, getting back to the topic there, like as we were just saying, you had a lot of feedback from people, and it essentially comes down to, I think, two kinds of feedback. You had those who were basically keeping to your original concept of the symbols and trying to make that work, and then you
Mm-hmm.
had people just saying, I don't like that concept, go do this.
And what's funny is both of those are the same people giving feedback.
Again, and I'm sure Shark and I were just talking about this before, we're going to get feedback about uh, for this one, too much blue, not enough blue, too much gold, not enough gold. I'm waiting to get those comments and when this goes up recorded.
And how many of them made it to this part of the video to know that you've already predicted their comment?
Oh, yes. But the challenge, of course, when it comes to game design like this is how do you know? I already see another problem with our chat interface. It kind of right now blocks out the last thing text until someone else types something else in.
Their icon.
Or no, the actual
Sure.
text itself, because I didn't see Algodo's comment about what the dog plays until he said needs enough red, or
Uh,
not enough red.
that might be just your window size. You might have to adjust the red frame in
Yeah,
OBS.
we'll have to do that after this cast. So I think we'll have to zoom that one in like a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more. Can you do that on OBS? Like tell it to zoom
Uh,
in something.
maybe.
Huh? I will have to mess with that.
At some other point.
Yeah, I gotta resist the urge just to do it all right now because I will balloon this chat out. Alright, well, that will be my work after this one is over. But back to the topic that when you're trying to build a game, or especially build any kind of design up, it's always tricky to know what aspects are required. Like, what is your game? Like, for instance, if we're talking about a platformer and somebody complains, I don't like to jump, then that's not exactly really good. That's not feedback that's really going to change your mind. Because you get rid of jumping, that changes your entire genre. But let's say in your platformer, you make it so characters can do like a crazy dash, some kind of like super quick dash, and people complain, you know what, this dash makes things very unruly, it's hard to control. Well, while the dash is part of your game, it's not really part of your core gameplay loop. And it's very important to try and differentiate the two kinds of elements in your game like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it may be something as simple as just tuning the dash.
Mm-hmm.
But it may be something as extreme as just completely removing it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something you'll have to figure out. And
of course,
if you think that if you think it's key enough to your game, then I would tune it. But if you don't think it's key enough, maybe get rid of it.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be part of the core gameplay loop to keep it, but it does need to fit with the core gameplay loop and whatnot. So tuning it could fix that, but you might need to straight off remove it.
Yep. And it reminds me of when I spoke with the developer of the game Concealed Intent. This was a turn-based strategy game set in space, but it used naval conventions like sonar and heat signatures for a character to find other ships. And he remembered people complaining that they felt like the whole stealth system was too confusing. But in the same vein, that was a core part of his game. That was the whole point of the name, Concealed Intent. So if he got rid of that, he basically just got rid of a major part of his gameplay loop.
Yeah. And, I mean, that's kind of the issue when you get to experimental kind of games, especially. Mm-hmm. Because there's not an established genre around them, so people are not sure what is supposed to be there, what's not supposed to be there. But at the same time, if you're doing experimental, maybe they're onto something. But maybe they're not at the same time.
Again, when you don't have an established foundation to go by, you're kind of going to be throwing things against the wall and hoping something sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of work. And again, like, you can attest to this one, Shark, about, having to make these decisions. I mean, I ran this many times over this, trying to figure out things for Game Wisdom. We even did, at one point, have polls for names of, like, our shows, how you wanted the stuff to be. And anytime you have to change something or go back, that is time and money that's permanently lost. You can't, magically reclaim 3 months of your time after you've already made that decision.
I wish I could.
Yeah. And of course, some people will argue, well, you should have figured that out beforehand. Know the solution to a problem before you know what the problem is. You can do that one, right?
Yeah, I mean, I that's a good point. Viking, reading how they play, but for that you really need them to record a video of it, and that's often a lot harder to get out of somebody.
Yep.
Testing it, but it is better if you can get it.
And this is again why playtesting is a major part of these kinds of games, because the only way you're going to know what people think is to be able to get their thoughts and have it down for you. Now, getting back to Shark's challenge and what I think a lot of developers face when it comes to like UI or elements that it's not. I think the problem is that it's not something that's easily quantified. Because again, playtesting, you can watch somebody play your game. Shark, again, you've watched me play Chromasia many times, and you've taken notes on what I've done, things that I ran into. But
Yeah.
the challenge, though, when it comes to UI and like symbols and stuff like that, is that you're dealing with things that there's no real, I think, clear definition for them. Like going back to my platformer example, again, there are key elements of a platformer. If your character can't jump right, that's not a point that can be argued. But when we talk about making something that's easy to understand or very clear on the UI, everyone has their own thoughts on things. Some people respond better to symbols. Some people respond better to colors. And it's kind of up to you as a designer to be, the negotiator and figure out how to get everybody happy.
Yeah, and I was trying to do both colors and symbols. But the issue is when we did both of them and, spent 3 months doing them, they looked aesthetically displeasing and they pulled away from the visual effect, the visual appeal of the UI, bringing the whole appearance down, which would, definitely hurt the sales in the end. And that's not something we could do. So we had to go, through the suggestion we got after that. The only thing that worked was strictly going by colors in a little slot that I had open there in the design. And I mean, it worked out great, except for colorblind people. But we can add an option, allow them to change the colors to a certain point, but they're neon, so there's, if they can't see, if they can't determine a bright red, bright glowing red from a bright glowing blue and a bright glowing yellow, then we're in trouble for them. But if they can see the difference between those, then we're good.
Yep. And again, it goes back to trying to ask the right questions sometimes for some of these issues. And again, you're never going to really know about that until you actually start figuring it out. And even in that case, when you start playtesting or asking people for advice, you may not even know, how to ask that to somebody. Because, like, going back to your example there, when you started coming up with the symbols, you weren't asking people, do you even want symbols to begin with? You were already past that point. And that's always been this challenge when it comes to these kinds of designs. That just as the consumer may not know how to properly give their feedback, you may not know how to actually ask for that feedback or what to ask for that feedback.
Yeah. And to what Viking and Oscar are talking about there in chat, I would say that if they're hung up on something, that's probably something you need to look at, because it, despite how little it is, it may be something worth changing. Because if it's big enough to get somebody hung up on it, it might be big enough to deal with. But I mean, if one person is like, I don't know, like I don't know what the proper way to say this is, like, has a very different opinion than the vast majority of them, that's when you kind of like just shove it in a closet kind of thing.
Yeah. It's that ever popular, I'm not sure there's an actual adage, but, if 1 out of 100 people are complaining about something, okay, that's not too bad. If it's 60 out of 100 people who are complaining about something, yeah, maybe there's an issue there. Again,
there's definitely an issue.
It reminds me of, and sometimes it may even be something nobody ever thought of. And I think this is where you have to be really careful, because it reminds me of that game. I gave this example before, where this was a platformer that you only jump by shooting your gun. So it's kind of like almost like a jetpack rules. I shoot down, my character goes up. And what they did was because that's the primary action, they used the right analog stick for that instead of the left. But my problem was I'm left-handed, so I need the primary action to be on my left hand. So I said that to the developers, and I remember I got critical. I got people making fun of me in their, like their fans, saying, "Oh, you couldn't figure out, or you can't use your left hand for that." And again, like something like that is probably an issue that didn't come up a whole lot in playtesting because most people are right-handed. But for the lefties out there, like they may not have gotten a lot of left-handed people playing their game. I could very well have been the first person to complain about that. And you always have to, again, take feedback into consideration, even if it is something that sounds stupid or only one person's complaining about. Because you never know, again, how that could have ultimately improved or hurt your game to a larger market. Because I think that's another very big point we have to mention. Playtesting is always going to be, a very small segment of your base. You're not going to get every one of your fans playtesting your game. That's never going to happen. So, even though maybe 1 out of 100 could be complaining about that, that could change to maybe 50 out of 1,000, or however it scales up.
Yeah, and the other thing is you give it more credence based on how hung up they are on it, because if it's just like, it'd be nice if this was a little bit different, and they are the only 1 out of 100, sweep it in the thing. But if they're really, really adamant about it, that provides more thing on there, because I mean, if only one person is in there, but they're extremely adamant, it may be because they're colorblind, because they're the only left-handed out of those 100. It could be, any of these other things, and you don't want to exclude people who are left-handed, or people who are colorblind, or people who are this or that. You want to be able to be available to as many people as possible, generally.
Yeah. And that is another really good point. Stuff such as, like you mentioned earlier, color blindness would be another big example. Somebody who's not colorblind, they're not going to care about having that feature in your game. But you have somebody who's colorblind, that's pretty critical to them. Another big thing is UI scaling or text scaling. This is a major one that pops up for a lot of AAA games, because I follow a lot of people who do accessibility when it comes to game dev. And the fact that many... Oh, my voice is dying. Oh, that's lovely. But many people complain about the size of text in games, especially on HD TVs, where it's so shrunken down you can barely read it. And that is a feature that, again, for people who don't have any issues with vision or have a very big enough or wide enough TV, they don't care about that. But again, that's an issue that can become very big to people, especially the further your game reaches.
Well, Viking, I wouldn't add every complaint to your to-do list. I would investigate complaints rather than just add them to a to-do list, because if you took everybody's feedback for 100%, that would potentially ruin your game. What I do is I get feedback in, and then I evaluate it, and if I can, I'll ask them questions. Like they may say, why don't you make this thing bigger, or whatever, and I was like, if I do that, then that's going to mess up everything else. Why do you want me to make it bigger? And then when they say they couldn't read the text inside the box, I was like, okay, well then instead of making the box bigger, I'll just make the text font bigger, and that solves the problem without causing me to redo literally everything, and causing tons of other problems.
And like we've said before, sometimes or many times people will have a complaint but not know or not think about what the solution is to that complaint. But again,
and some of them just give you random solutions that they think will solve their problem, but they don't actually know, and it'll actually maybe make it worse. And you've got to get to the core of the problem. I think a game designer is very much like a doctor. You know, you go to the doctor and you tell them that your stomach hurts, and it could be one of many things. It could be, they could go there and say that they think they have, acid reflux disease. And if you just as a doctor just straight up listen to them and just give them some medicine for that, you may have just given something that's very bad for them, because they may just be having heartburn. They may just be they may be constipated. They may have cancer in their stomach. They could have many different things. The point is what they're trying to relay to that is that they're having stomach pains, and then you need to look into what is causing that stomach pain, and then hit that trouble point, whatever it is, to fix that trouble point, rather than just doing what they recommend you do.
It's an idea that multiple symptoms can all lead to different issues, or the same symptoms can have different diagnosis or prognosis.
Yeah, and even they can have like 6 or 7 complaints, and they sound like they're completely unrelated, but then you get to the pain point and it's all the exact same thing. You do this one little small thing, and it fixes all 7 pain points for them.
Yeah. And again, you will never know as a developer how all this stuff will relate until you do play testing and start looking at things deeper. But the other side of this that I want to focus on at least for a few minutes, again, is when is it time to yield? When do you just say, you know what, my idea is wrong, my fans are right, let's change it?
Yeah, that's a hard one, because you definitely do, for the most part, don't need to count how much work you put into it. A very, very small percentage you need to count that. But that needs to be a very, very small percentage, because, again, at the end, you're trying to make the best game possible. But, if you have, like, half your development time in this, then, or if it's, like, critical your design or part of your core concepts, you really have a hard time getting rid of it. But if there is a huge wave of complaints about it and they are absolutely adamant, maybe you've been there. But I would avoid bending at all costs basically there if possible. But if it's something small, something easy to do, something you can, or something where you see there's a problem, absolutely just bend right away. And in the middle of those is where you're going to have to make a decision. You're going to have to evaluate the pros and cons, and don't just say, there's 10 pros and 15 cons, and then say, okay, well, then we're not doing it. Evaluate how much weight each of those have on your game and the game making process, and make a decision for yourself. We can't really give you good, straight off advice on this kind of thing, because this is something you'll have to make on a case by case basis. As a game designer, a game designer basically diagnoses problems in their game and then fixes the problems. So look at the pros and cons to this, diagnose it as a game designer, and figure out if this is something you should bend on, or if this is something you should hold.
I remember when I spoke with the developers of Battle Brothers and how they organize everything. What they always did was they come up with like a spreadsheet, and they would put comments and complaints into basically one of 3 categories. One was, we can do this, it will be very easy, we know it will get done very quickly, it's not that big of a deal. Another one would be, this is a very big issue. This is, mission critical. If we don't fix this, our game's not going to get done. So, this is priority number one. Then they had another category for, this would be a great idea, but it would take too much time now. Let's put it on the back burner. And then they would have one, this would take too much time, too much work, too much effort. There's no way in hell this is going to get into our game. So we have to kind of put this in the it's not going to happen column.
Right. That seems like a pretty good method. I don't know if it's 100% concrete, but it seems pretty good.
Yeah, and again, you always, I think, we've said this many times before, but regardless of the feedback, you always have to at least take it. Even if it's somebody saying your game is stupid, you're a dirty, lazy developer, you still have to listen to that person. You don't have to respond or you don't have to, do anything on that, but you always have to essentially have the channel of communication open.
Mm-hmm. Feedback is the most important thing, I would say, as a game designer that you need access to.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about game design documents and the importance of having one. And I was actually talking to Tim about that the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that, he wasn't, able to do that kind of thing. And then he showed me like a little brief text and, with like 5 things on it. And I was like, that is technically a game design document, a very, very, very loose one. Extremely loose, as loose as you can get, but that is technically a game design document. And then later that day, I was watching a stream, and he had like one of the co-op tools where you're able to list things that you're going to be put in there, basically a roadmap and everything. I was like, Tim, that's technically a game design document right there. So don't tell me you can't do it. But yeah, I mean, your feedback is absolutely important, and you've got to have room, in your design to bend and flex in there, so that the way I like to describe it is you have like a few different things. Okay, so like you have a really hard game design document, and this is like a cracker. So if anybody gives you any kind of feedback, you hit that cracker, your game design is shattered, it's in pieces, nothing works, it's a broken game, scrap it. And that is absolutely not the right way to go.
Yeah.
Because that's not the. Then there's the other path of too loose to where you don't have a game design document, have no direction, and you just wander out in the middle of the desert and die. Of thirst.
It's the ever popular, I'm just going to implement all feedback into my game. What's the worst that could happen there?
Yeah. And then, there's a safely extreme example of where you have a framework and you have holes, pockets all within it. Pockets there that can be filled with stuff and can shift it over like a net, like a rope net, and like you can make one section bigger, which will bow that net out, but it will not break it. You just have more in that section. It bows that net out and pushes things out more, and you have this flexibility and everything to take feedback and incorporate that in. And that's it ties into bending or breaking, because if you're able to bend, then you have a flexible thing, and if it breaks, then you just broke your game. And you have to determine when to bend and break based on your net and everything, and what it can hold, what exactly all the specs are at that moment, and what would happen if you changed it.
I'm kind of messing with my camera at the moment because I'm seeing like this like really weird like white box. Oh wait, I see the problem. Never mind. I know what it is. There we go. Yep. Again, sometimes you need to know where the problem is, as we just said. But
Exactly.
yep, it's very hard again to know, how secure is your design. And again, like this is one of those topics I feel like we could easily spend like 2 to 3 hours on because there's a lot of different aspects that it touches on. I think one thing again is kind of the hubris of the developer. The person who says my idea is perfect. How dare you argue that I'm not doing the best game?
Hmm. That's a road you do not want to be.
Mm-hmm. Again, the ever popular "How dare you?" or "My idea is perfect. Let me take the controller and show you how to play my game."
Yeah, I think telling the players how to play your game is a good thing to a point, but
Mm-hmm.
you got to tell them through the game, not through hey, give me the controller.
Yeah.
You gotta like point an arrow, go this way. Don't punish them for not going that way. I mean, they do this in racing games. If you turn around, they're like wrong way,
Mm-hmm.
flashing, and then show you an arrow pointing back the other way. I mean, that's technically telling you how to play,
Mm-hmm.
but it's doing it in a way that is helpful to the player, not harmful to the player.
Yep. And I think when we're trying to get to like this level of understanding the feedback and understanding your design, I think your comparison of like kind of the fishing net is a good one. That your design should be secured enough, but when you go into playtesting, like you shouldn't be playtesting your game when you don't even have a core gameplay loop. But
Hmm.
it's again like our safely extreme example. It's gotta be wide enough that you can allow for changes and pivoting, but still close enough that you have a game plan.
You have a structure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a framework there, framework of nets that hold everything together,
Mm-hmm.
but flexible enough to put whatever in there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not technically whatever. I mean, there's certain things that wouldn't fit in there. I mean, you have a rope net that's flexible, and you drop 1,000 razor blades into it. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably not a good idea.
Yeah. And wait, what's he saying? Oh, we're talking about game design, Oliver, and game dev. I'm not a boomer. I'm Generation X, right?
Uh,
But when you're trying to build like your design up around these ideas, I think I always go back to what Chris Park was telling me about some of his games. Like again, get your core gameplay loop as solid as you can, as quickly as you can, because ultimately that's your foundation. If that's shaky, then you don't have a good enough game to begin with, kind of thing. But once you have that set, everything else has to get filtered through it. And that, I think, is a great way to kind of, get rid of a lot of the mysteries of whether or not something can help or hurt your game.
right. And as Viking said, early tech demo is definitely good. There's a saying, test as soon as you can,
Mm-hmm.
fail fast, kind of thing. And but you need your core gameplay loop to be in there and pretty solid at that point,
Mm-hmm.
though. You don't want to be testing, I don't know, an RPG when you just have it moving up, left, and such. You just have directional movement and everything. It's like don't test it at that point. You need a core gameplay loop. You need something in there of substance to test, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You need some encounters in there. You need maybe some something in there besides just movement. You need
Mm-hmm.
maybe some dialogue stuff. Maybe just thrown in there. Don't put like a ton of effort behind making it pretty or anything. Just make something at least testable,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think with that, like I said, we did start a little bit late, so we kind of have to move on. But I think this is a topic we can definitely come back to and explore in other areas. But I guess for my final thoughts on this, and I'll throw it over to you, that at the end of the day, you always need to have a game plan. Like, there has to be something that you can chart from A to Z to get your game finished. But you have to be able to bend to what fans and what your playtesters will say. Because as a developer, you are never going to know 100% how your game is going to turn out in the consumer base. You can certainly know how you're going to respond to it. But again, you're not 500,000 people or 1,000 consumers or anything like that. And if you're not willing to bend at all, chances are your game is not going to turn out as well as it could have. You may have, 500, 100, 1,000 people, whatever, who are hardened fans just like you, and they'll put up with all those issues. But the problem, though, is if you're trying to reach a larger audience, people who aren't thinking like you, then you have to be willing to adjust for that. It could be a simple adjustment, it could be something complicated. But you still need to be able to be ready for that.
Yeah, and what was I going to say now? I lost it. Dang it! I hate it when I have something and I lose it. Let's move on.
I think that's a really interesting point there, Viking, about trying to listen to what the game wants to be. It's like that old, like the sculptor's adage. Like, I don't make the sculptor, or I don't make the figure. I let the medium, or I let the stone talk to me about what it's going to turn into.
Yeah, you got to become a game whisperer.
Mm-hmm. There's my new thing. That could be my service for the channel. I will whisper to your game, and it will tell me exactly what it needs to be. What's that game? You want more roguelike elements in it? Okay.
Yeah. Maybe that's a name that we can name this cast, the Game Whisperer.
There we
Game
go.
Whispering Weekly.
Alright, but let's very quickly go over some weird games, and we're going to switch over to my normal show demo. I'm going to have to take the Cyber Shark, though, in a second. I thought I requested a key for that. Now I'm getting keys for games I'm don't remembering where I'm getting them from.
But sometimes I just send them to you.
Mm-hmm.
Without you requesting.
Alright, give me...
I've had several do that for me.
I got games I don't even remember asking for, and they just show up.
Yeah, same here, too.
You just never know. Alright, let me see how this is going to work here. And... let me replace this. I get a Cyber Shark down there. Don't you love when you have to do on-air work? Oh, let me get you down here. Shrink the shark. There we go. I can't do it perfectly, but this is just for our weird game segment, so it's not going to be a do or die. There we go.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get you another layout for this one. For the weird game segment.
There we go. So let's see what we got. Looks like lots of Doctor Who related stuff is on deck. Apparently there's a Doctor Who game out.
Who would have guessed?
What is this? So is this a video game, or is this like a visual novel? That looks like a puzzle game. Okay. Well, that's a thing.
That's weird.
Arrow.
I
Oh, it's
take
an
it they're not.
indie genre.
Oh, but then we know everything we know. It's indie. It's an indie game.
Mm-hmm. De- what? Detective Solitaire Inspector Magic.
Oof.
That has nothing to do with any of the like three of those four words don't work here.
I mean, are we going to see some Magic the Gathering cards in there? I'm not seeing any. I'm only seeing solitaire cards
I, I don't see how this is detective work
or Magic.
or inspecting.
Yeah.
Okay then. Driver
So
not.
this should just be solitaire.
Yeah.
Weird solitaire. That's what they should rename it.
Id Ego? What? Ooh, old school shooter, no hand holding. Oh, there are no special abilities or level skipping. I know level skipping was a required feature in first person shooters these days.
So this one sounds pretty bare bones.
Mm-hmm. Love the aesthetics too.
Mm-hmm.
Hope you like gray.
Hope you like stock Unity or whatever assets, Unreal assets,
Yeah.
because that's what
Escape.
it looks like most of it.
What?
Yeah, I do definitely. Care actually made that for me, but I love it, and I have so many of them. Josh can attest. He's seen
Mm-hmm.
probably about what 15, 20 of them.
Yeah, lots of sharks. Rock Simulator.
Oh, that sounds entertaining.
Would this be considered safely extreme?
I don't know. This might be just extreme, or
Uh,
safely safe. I can't tell.
we could turn that into a 12-hour stream, right?
Sure. We could go with Fighting Girl. I'm sure somebody in chat would like that.
Mm-hmm. I wonder who. United. What is it? Alright, just a puzzle. Full choke. Interlude. Oh, jeez. Casual first-person shooter.
So you got to be a 50 casual to play it,
Oof.
or can't be. Which one is it?
Mm. Dashbot Ninja. Fateless? What the? Oof.
That's a.
Oof.
Ugh. That's a.
Yee.
That's definitely assets there.
Yeah.
Very low quality ones at that.
New York Mysteries. Build 'em up, shoot 'em down.
Probably an asset flip if I had to guess.
Oh, there's that Sanic the. I'm not reading that whole title. My voice will die before I get through it.
That looked nothing like it. Nothing like it should. I mean, it should be. It should be really into memes instead of like.
Mm-hmm.
What did it look like? What you
FMV.
call? Yeah, FMV. Yeah,
And it has a Steam page. That was $100, I think, well spent, right?
exactly. They'll
But
make 100% of that back.
I did get a key for this one, Neon Noodles. That's the Zachtronics-like game. You are
Hmm.
Pig Sitter. Blaster Master is apparently getting a new game.
That could be interesting.
Run Over You.
I enjoyed the original way back when.
Mm-hmm. Cowboys versus Hipsters. What the?
That sounds very promising.
Okay.
Send
Okay.
your fighters wisely.
Those. Oh, look at this windscreen.
Neato. Exactly.
I
This
bet
game is
that took a
neato.
weekend to make.
And no, that at least took them at least 4 years to work on that. Because they have a 17-year dev cycle on that game.
Mm-hmm. This looks interesting, but I have no idea what this gameplay loop is. Turn-based
Yeah.
strategy game. You can control dozens of characters at once.
Oh, remember that game we looked at? I think it was last week that we were really interested in, the one that looked like Factorio kind of thing.
Yeah.
The I added it to my wish list to look at it and everything. And the first few days of reviews, whew,
Yeah, that's what I saw. You linked that to me too.
yeah, it was what 30%.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have rarely ever seen a game that badly reviewed.
In early access too.
Uh huh.
This looks interesting.
It could have some legs. I mean, it kind of looks like Ori to a point. Looks like a less pretty Ori.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to Ori, it looks absolutely ugly. But
Everything
it
looks
doesn't
ugly
look
compared to Ori.
exactly. But it looks like it has potential.
What the? A cyberpunk stealth and shoot roguelike?
What have I said about Cyberpunk?
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Looks interesting.
Limitless replayability. You know I love that term.
Oh yeah.
The name, though, unfortunately, I think is going to hurt it because it has like nothing like related to the game.
Yeah, it's definitely not a safely extreme name.
How about Latin
It's
Simulator?
I don't know any Latin, or else I'd say something right now, but there's nothing. Just
Oh, look at this. A fish
oh,
eating simulator.
well, that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah. Two bosses.
Am I one of the bosses?
Maybe. Maybe you're the hidden boss.
Uh oh.
Werewolf Voice Best Board Game.
Yes. What? Okay, I am completely lost on that name.
Mm-hmm. Evolution Battle Simulator. Alright. This will be the last page, and then we'll move on to our final topic. Ooh, I'm definitely not clicking on that one.
Which one? Oh, I see it. The board game one.
Yep. Space.
Drakon would love that one.
Mm-hmm. Grudge TV. Top-down bullet hell. Okay. Wait, it's free
That
to
you
play. Ugh. Oh, remember talking about playtesting and feedback? Why does it matter? We chose because we liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, jeez. Get me out of here. The
Know
deluxe
when
edition.
to bend and break. They did not bend.
Mm-hmm.
Probably should have.
Two-player co-op. Okay. Oh no. Looks just like a very basic shooter
Kind of.
with insane combos. Dodge if you can.
I
Stickman
didn't see
go.
any. Dodge if you can. Wonder if that's if they have wrenches in there. So if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
Alright. But let's get to our final topic because we are running a little bit late this week. And let's talk about adding value to a game. And this kind of goes back to our first point about knowing when to bend or break. because there's always something you can add to a game. I think anyone who says that their game is 100% complete may be kind of fooling themselves. I guess, what do you think about that one?
I definitely fooled myself. I mean, we got to a point on Chromasia, our last. There's a word a day for Mojo if he's here. And we got to a point, when we were in our final beta, to where we stopped getting feedback. Everybody had given all the feedback they had, basically, and we had fixed all of their concerns and everything, and they couldn't find any way to make the game better. And I was like, well, I mean, according to all the feedback we have, we technically have a perfect game right now. Probably not technically perfect, but according to every bit of information we have, it is perfect. And, of course, after release and after our failure and everything, I mean, like, we got perfect review scores and people definitely really enjoyed the game, but nobody bought it. And there were some faults in the game, mainly the art, that prevented people from buying it. And, I showed some of the issues to some of my testers and everything, and they're like, oh, I never noticed that. So, yeah, I mean, even if you get to that point, you never have a perfect game. I mean, like, I didn't think I had a perfect game, but I thought I had pretty dang close. I mean, I think we did pretty well on gameplay-wise, but not on art or, definitely, like, some of the things in the story that were actually already intended to be in the story didn't actually make them in, and that caused issues and tons of other little things that, but, like, hindsight's 2020.
And with that said, there's always that feeling of being able to add more to your game and trying to get as much value out of it. And as we said before, there's that tendency to think that just adding more of what you have will make your game better. I always say that example of, my game is 10 levels long, I add another 10 levels long, I'm doubling the game, so surely that means the game is now double in value. But
I wish.
Yeah, it doesn't always work that way. Just as in the other weird example, the example on the thumbnail for the section I included from XCOM 2. And what they did for their expansions is they don't add more in terms of length. They add in brand new systems that integrate into the game. So it's adding depth, but it's not something you can easily quantify into a game. And it added amazing value to XCOM 2.
Yeah. You were saying that adding in more levels and whatnot would, maybe increase the value of the game. And I could state a point where you might actually lessen the value of your game by adding more. Because when we were working on the last game, we had a limited amount of art assets.
Yep.
And I figured out, I basically did some figuring in my head to, basically figure out that we could only have 15 maps. And the reason why we could only have 15 maps is because we had the limited assets. I said, I figured if we had 4 different kinds of castles, different layouts, same sprites, but, different colors, that would be work. But if you had a 5th one, that'd be a bit too much, and people would get bored of it. You have one grass tile that's going to tile everywhere. You have, few wilderness things that are going to be everywhere, and you need a few on even your castles kind of thing, your castle maps. So, you could do a castle front map where it shows the front of a little bit of the castle, a little bit of nature kind of thing. You could have 3 of those and be fine. You could have 6 nature maps and be fine. As long as you divide them, spread them out and everything. And then that was all 15. And if we had done one more map, we would have pushed our assets too far. At least I think we would have. And at some point we would have put, more maps, and it would have
Mm-hmm.
pushed the resources too far. And every map would have felt the same. It would have felt like nothing new. It dragged the experience down. People would have been taken out of the experience and whatnot, and be like, "Oh, this is just crap." So I mean, we could have easily put 30 maps in there because it was absolutely no trouble hardly to put a map in there because I mean it was maybe like
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes an hour worth of work to build a map
Yeah.
and then put enemies in it and then you're good, so we could have done another 15 maps in a couple of days easily and doubled the amount of maps, but I would
Well.
argue that would have drastically
Mm-hmm.
disproved our game, rather improving it, disproving it.
Yeah.
What is that even? Is
I don't know.
unimproving it? Unimproving it.
Yeah.
Terminology.
Yeah, and like as we've said before, length or hours into a game, I don't think that represents a very useful metric these days. Because there are so many games being released daily that saying your game is 200 hours of platforming or RPGs or whatever, I think that's more of a turnoff these days because there's so many of these titles coming out. Like I've been trying to play that idle game, Dragon Cliff, on Steam. It's a great example, kind of like the whole idle, send your characters out, bring stuff out, sell them out again kind of thing. But it's still like one of those games that no matter how you play it, it's going to be at least 30 to 100 hours of that same kind of grind. And it's like, even though I like this, do I really need 100 hours of this gameplay?
Yeah. And I mean, we got into we had a talk on this before about the price of a game, the enjoyment,
Mm-hmm.
the hours in it, and from that discussion, what we got out of it is hours are only important to the point where you enjoy those hours.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, if people are not enjoying enough to go that far, like I mean, it could be a 40-hour game. And if I'm only enjoying it enough to get 10 minutes into it, then it's a 10-minute game for me. And I'm not going to enjoy it. That's going to, make me feel like I, overpaid probably, and this, that, and the other. So it's not about how many hours you can put into the game. It's how many enjoyable hours you can get your players to play it for.
Mm-hmm. And trying to figure that out, though, that is definitely a topic in of itself. And one thing that we've seen from a lot of developers, especially in indie space, is coming up with interesting or unique ways to add that value to your game. Earlier I mentioned XCOM 2, but we could say the same thing about FTL. When FTL got its kind of quote-unquote advanced edition, and that was its form of DLC, they didn't add, more length to that game. They just packed in what was there with more variety. You got more ships, more events, more weapons. These aren't elements that, in a way, adds time to your game, but on the other hand, it kind of does because you're giving the player more things that can happen in your title. And here's my game of the week, or my favorite quote: "Binding of Isaac" being a principal example.
Binding of what?
Mm-hmm. Nobody's ever heard of that one.
Yeah, I mean, a system can add more value to your game potentially than more levels because it really all depends on your design and everything that's already in there. I mean, if your game is really addicting in a good way, not in a bad way, hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
that they want to play more, then more levels might be the solution. You've got a really addicting game that people like, but there's only levels to it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we'll go up to 10, see what that does.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you generally have enough levels.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, I mean, you could run into an issue where you don't have levels, but that may be because you don't have enough art assets, kind of thing, to make stuff different enough to be appealing to people. And I mean, that's again, like you said, a topic for its own thing. But yeah, I mean, generally just adding more content, more of the same content, isn't going to help you unless you just don't have enough in the first place, which is very unlikely, but possible. What's more likely is that you're going to need to, want to add in systems that not add more content, but make what content you have more experiences into it, has more different possibilities of enjoyment into it.
And when we talk about games like that, I think we all know the number one example would be Paradox Interactive and how they expand their games with DLC, and all that DLC is always new systems. And like what we say is that these games are just radically different depending upon what time you pick them up and what DLCs you have.
Yeah, it's really mind-numbing, kind of what your game will actually make it better. And this is again back to where you need feedback and whatnot to what players want, what would make the game better for them. I mean, sometimes something that you could do is not add more content or more systems, but add in a better way to do things that you already have done. Like an equipment system that takes 15 presses to get one piece of gear equipped. If you can, basically shortcut that to where it only takes 3 presses, I mean, people will get more enjoyment out of your game from that.
Yeah. But when we start talking about quality of life features and improving things like that, I think that's another kind of subcategory to this topic. Because you're not really adding anything in that regard, but you're changing what you already have. And again, this is a very tough one to talk about because every game is different. As we what you just said there, getting back to adding in more of what's there may not add value to it. But what if we're talking about a puzzle game, and the entire game loop is about nothing but solving puzzles? Then yes, having more puzzles would help you. But
maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But in that same breath, if it's just all just changing the puzzles a little slightly, then people aren't really going to respond to that. How many indie games have we played that are just nothing but puzzles? And it's basically puzzle 1, move block left. Puzzle 2, move the same block, just move it to the right. And we're just mirroring everything and just being padded out.
Yeah, I like that. And I quote, like that. One game you played where you had the arrow shooting at you in different ways, and the puzzle was avoiding the arrows.
Yeah. And we're going to be looking at that on the Indie Spotlight stream next week, too.
Yeah.
And the example that I wanted to bring up, and then I may want to wrap things up because, again, we ran a little bit late in terms of setting up, but I wanted to talk about Ghost Control Inc. This was a game that I looked at on the grab bag this week, and it's a game that I really liked. The foundation is there, the core gameplay loop works, but the problem was that what's there doesn't seem to be fleshed out enough, no pun intended, for the amount of time. And this was a game that I remember hearing that they had plans to keep supporting it, but the game just didn't sell well enough to kind of warrant that, or even for developers, I think, to even be around still to keep post-release content going. And this is one of those situations where you always think to yourself, what if the game added in more? What if there was more to it, or they were able to get around to it? Would that improve upon the game? And this raises, I think, a very tough point that a lot of people sometimes don't think about. if I release my game, let's say like this, and let's say in 6 months, 2 years, thanks to DLC, post-release support, whatever, it's now this great. But what does that say about your original release? That it was like nowhere near as good as it was, or as good as the game as it is now. Like, this is an issue I think a lot of people think about with when it comes to live service or games as a service. That why should I even give your game the time of day when in 2 years from now it could be the best game ever?
Mm-hmm. That is the one of many eternal dilemmas of early access.
Mm-hmm.
There's the flip side of that where developers are like, why would I spend a long time developing this when I can put it out now, get money now that would help me, that would pay me to continue to do this.
Yep.
And then oftentimes, they put it out too soon. It's too incomplete. Nobody likes it. Everybody refunds it, and nobody buys it after that point. And you sunk your game.
Yep.
It's like putting a boat out in the water before you have the outer shell to it. It's just a frame, and it just sinks right to the bottom.
Mm-hmm. And like there are developers who will chase that post-release support. Like we said earlier, my game is only 20 levels long. I'm going to release 40 level DLC in the next 6 months, and my game will be now even better than it was before. And then you just blew all the funding that you received on your original game, and nobody bought that DLC.
Mm-hmm.
It's again one of those things where you can go wrong in any direction if you're not careful with it.
Yeah, game development is not an easy anything, to be honest. It's not. It's a very hard field. It's quite often, very, very low pay considering the skill needed to do it. And the only reason why you should ever do game development is not because you enjoy playing games or because you love games or because you want to make money. It's because you want to make games, you enjoy making games, and you want to do it for a living.
You're going to suffer for your art, essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, if you get lucky in that, I mean, you might have a lot of money. But if you get unlucky, which is very, very likely, you might end up broke.
Yep. And I think, and this kind of wraps back into the first topic, when knowing or taking feedback. Whenever you add in new systems or new things like that, you really need to be careful with how that integrates into your base game. Like, here are the two examples. Like going back to XCOM 2, and even with your first XCOM by Firaxis, the systems that they added, nobody was really thinking about. At least from the general consumer side of things. Stuff like the meld system, mechs, or the Nemesis system in War of the Chosen. But now I can't think about playing XCOM without those systems. It's just so well integrated. But the other point was something like with Surviving Mars. That if you remember, we talked about its expansion, that they added in the colonizing of the game. That was something people were really wanting from day one, that they had to wait for the expansion and essentially pay for that feature. And I think you have to be really careful with kind of what expectations you're setting for the consumer.
Yeah. And the other thing is, when you're adding in, this is kind of its own subtopic, but when you're adding in your new systems and everything, you have to be careful because you can upset the balance of your game and have to go rebalance it, which is not necessarily the worst thing in the world, as long as you go back and fix it.
But if you don't,
make sure that you can go back and fix it.
And like as another big example, Anno 1800 is a game that I bought it. I think I got the season pass for that as well, and I've been putting off waiting to play it because I'm waiting for all that expansions and DLC stuff to come out for it. But it raises again that point that somebody buys your game fresh, and that experience is worse because they don't spend the extra money. They're going to feel like the game is cheating them out of it.
Mm-hmm. And like what was it, Surviving Mars?
Yeah.
I mean, that game. I mean, like a lot of people felt that game was not worth buying
Mm-hmm.
unless you had the
Yeah.
DLC. And then, but when you add in the DLC, then it raises the price of the game essentially to now something that you would again possibly think that it's not worth the money.
Yeah. And it's that very weird contradiction depending upon the game. Was again like with XCOM, nobody complained about War of the Chosen or Enemy Within, of saying this stuff should have been free for the game. It should have been just integrated in. But like you said, and I saw the same thing with Surviving Mars. It was basically we complained about this from day one. You added it in, but we have to pay for what pay for something that we wanted in the base game.
Yeah, I mean the thing is you're coming about nobody said that about XCOM. I mean, somebody said that about XCOM.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody should have said that this should have been in the base game. I know somebody said that. There are probably a few hundred people that said that, but nobody of any big percentages of your feedback said that.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole Surviving Mars, I mean, their base gameplay was lacking.
Yeah.
They needed more in there, and we kind of get to one of those problems where a developer creates a problem and then sells you the fix kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they didn't mean to do it that way, but in the end, that's the way they did it, and people were not happy about it.
Yeah. And I have one final example, and then I think that's going to be it for me. Like going back to what we were saying about adding in pure content or lengthening your game, that I think it can work, but the content has to be greater than or equal to what's in the game already. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to sell me another level of your game, then you better make that level be amazing. It's got to be higher and higher quality. And the example that comes to my mind is Payday 2. One of the many things that Payday 2 did with its live service was add in more heists. And then those heists, I think, were $6.99 purchases. And when you get a new heist in Payday 2, it is legitimately its own unique case. Each heist has a unique environment. It has unique objectives. It has its own feel to it. And they could have just added in more, here's a bank, we're going to rob another bank. And then maybe this bank is in a Caribbean setting. And then this bank is in, let's say, a wooded setting or whatever. But they didn't. They really went that extra mile to give that content value. So that even when they did actually add in multiple bank heists in Payday 2, but each one is its own unique thing. One of my favorites was the big bank, and I could spend 30 minutes talking about that one, which I'll resist the temptation. But when you got a new heist in Payday 2, it felt like there was value to it. It added something to the game that wasn't there before, and I think that's the major point.
My question is why don't you want the bank in the forest? I mean, you have the bank in the forest, right? And then you have the armed guard deers, you patrolling the area, and then you have the bear with the big glasses doing the accounting in the back, right? And then you have
I did see a group of. What do you call like a group of deer? It's not a flock, right? Just a herd, I guess. I saw a herd of deer on my way back from the library yesterday. Maybe they were out, you know, getting their banknotes done.
Maybe it's just deer. You know, just the way it is for multiple deer. It's just I saw a deer.
But I think that's all I have to say, at least for tonight. So, do you have anything to wrap up the cast with, Shark?
Not really, but I do want to thank Care for my cyberpunk Sharky. Leading, kind of going towards our sort of cyberpunk, partially cyberpunk game, Project Triad, because I absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, did you get cut out there, or did you finish?
Yeah,
okay.
I finished.
Okay. Yeah, and Stardew Valley is another really good example. Games like Stardew Valley, Terraria, of course, Minecraft being another big one, that they added in, again, more content to flesh out the systems, but not exactly grow the length of the game. And I think that's very important to clarify. If you're going to add length to your game, it's got to be immensely high quality. Again, the Payday 2 example being a big one. But if you want to add value to your game, typically you want to add in systems or improvements that make what's there better.
Exactly.
But before I completely lose my voice, we're going to end things for this week. So I'd like to thank everybody watching. If you're watching this live or recorded, I want to give a shout out to Shark for designing the layout. And again, any feedback, questions, concerns, you want to throw shade at Shark for making it, let us know in the comments below. And if you can come up with a clever name for the cast, let us know, because we have a big old space we need to fill. We'll be back next Sunday, ideally at our regular time with 3:34 p.m. EST as a start. You can find me on Twitter and such at GW Bycer. We have our Discord channel open to everybody down below. And Shark, where can people find you?
Well, there should be a Discord link for me down below in the recorded version. I don't know if it's a live version or not.
No, it won't, because it's up for my defaults.
So to be there in the recorded version, up in so many days.
Yep.
And it'll be on Nexus Games 1, INC 1 rather, on Twitter. And if you have any problems with the overlay, you can also blame Josh, because he's been giving me feedback on what he likes and dislikes about the entire time, shaping how it looks like. So you can throw some shade his way too.
Just throw everybody under the bus at the same time.
Exactly.
But that is going to do it for this week. So come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. And I will see you all later tonight for our regular game streams. But until then, take care.